Hello everyone, this is J.D. Seal and I'm the Vice President at SkyView Partners, and I want to welcome you to our session today on addressing and automating audit requirements for the IBMI. SkyView Partners is committed to providing clients with products and services that save time, reduce costs, and simplify the management of security administration and compliance. Our presenter today is Carol Woodbury, President and CTO of SkyView Partners. Prior to forming SkyView, Carol spent 16+ years at positions at IBM, including Chief Engineering Manager and Security Architect for the IBM iSeries Security Group. Is also the author of the book IBMI and I5OS Security and Compliance, a Practical Guide, available at skyviewpartners.com. SkyView Partners does have various products that can help you. The SkyView Risk Assessor software is our automated independent vulnerability assessment tool. SkyView Policy Minder, automated security administration tool. The Audit Journal Reporter for IBMI, a predefined auditor-ready reports on security events recorded in the Audit Journal, very popular tool. And our new SkyView Policy Minder for IBM AIX. If you're interested in that, we had a great session on that just earlier today, and we'd be happy to sign you up for the recording of that as well. Remember, at SkyView Partners, we never charge for installation and basic configuration. So with that, I want to introduce and turn this over to our presenter today, Carol Woodbury. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning, JD. How are you doing today?
Never better.
Good. All righty. Show my screen real quick here. Before I get into the demo of the product, I just wanted to go over a few things that we'll be discussing today. When you think about audit requirements, you know, there's a couple different types of audit. There's the external auditors, there's the internal auditors, and the things I'm going to be showing you today certainly apply to either scenario. Some of those go in a little bit more in depth. The internal auditor tends to go a bit more in depth just because they tend to know your environment a little bit more, so we can show how you might go a little bit more in depth with the internal auditor. But basically what we're trying to do is help you prepare for an audit. And what I like to discuss is that you actually have what I call a compliance lifestyle. And a compliance lifestyle is more of a perpetually being in compliance with your audit requirements versus having to do this fire drill that happens right before the auditor comes. So if the systems are more perpetually in compliance, then you don't have quite the fire drill before they come, and quite frankly, your systems are in better shape. So let's see how Policy Minder and our other products can help you with that. So let's get signed on here. Okay, so the first thing that I'll talk about is our Risk Assessor product, and our Risk Assessor product is there to help you do a vulnerability assessment. So depending on the laws and regulations that you have, some like the PCI payment card industry requires an annual vulnerability assessment, and that's the perfect thing to apply Risk Assessor for. Risk Assessor will look at over 100 risk points across the entire I5OS security configuration. It produces a report that then tells you where those risk points do not meet security best practices. So it can give you a definite place on where to start. This is really good, especially if people have not really been through an audit process or are about to start with a new firm and don't know what their criteria are going to be. At least you have an idea of where your system stands against security best practices. And best practices are defined by things like NIST standards, the ISO 27000 standards, and then translated into IBMI terms by things like the Security Reference Manual as well as my book. So that's Risk Assessor. It produces a main report, and then it has 30-some supplemental reports that help all tell the picture of where your security stance is from an I5OS perspective. Okay, so that's Risk Assessor. Now, Risk Assessor compares against security best practices. What PolicyMinder does is allow you to define what your policy is going to be, and then allows you to compare your policy with what the system's settings are. Now, I'm emphasizing your policy, and why is that? The settings on any system, regardless of whether it's IBM I or AIX, I've never seen a system be totally in compliance with security best practices. There's always some exception to those rules. And so if you're constantly being compared against security best practices, you have to do these mental notes about, oh, but that's because of this, or that's due to this exception. And so it's not helping you save time, and it's more of a mental exercise than anything else. So once you get your system to the best point that you can be with the assistance of Risk Assessor, the next step is to go to PolicyMinder, because that will allow you to make sure that you do stay in compliance with your own policy. So how do we do that? Well, in terms of audit, there are things with the system values, as we were looking at before, user profile settings, selected file settings. When you look at the what we can do, I'll take the option 60 called Initialized Policies. Again, the idea of PolicyMinder is to save you time. We want to reduce the amount of time you're having to spend either preparing for an audit or staying in that compliance lifestyle. So what we do when you first start out with the product is allow you to initialize the product and initialize most categories within the product. So the way this works is if you initialize something like the system value category, it goes out and gets the current settings for all of the system values, brings those into the product, and that's the value for those system values. So it saves you time. You don't have to populate that by hand. So I've done that for this system. So let's see what that looks like. So I took option 1 from the main menu, work with policies. And so this is basically where all of your policies are defined. So if I take an option and drill down a little bit further, you can see a lot of times the auditors are very concerned with things like your password composition rules. So if we drill down further, you can see, yes, let's look at the password expiration interval. Okay, and the policy says 90. Cool, that's great. So what happens, though, if your system does not match the policy? Let's see if we can force that issue here. Change this to no max. Okay, so now what we're going to do is run a compliance check. Take option 2. And now you can see that the compliance status changed from next level, or from compliant to next level. So we need to drill down a little bit. And you can see that the password is now out of compliance. I take a 5 next to that, and you can see there's compliant no for the password expiration interval. So if I take this, and the policy, or what we want it to be, is 90, but the value, or what was the value that was discovered during the compliance check, is no max. So we have a couple options here. If for some reason my policy changed, I could say, well, accept, and that would change my policy. But I actually want to fix it. So what I want to do is make my system match my policy. So I can enable fix it, and what this is going to do is actually change that system value. I've already enabled fix it on this system, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and now the value is 90. How do I know that for sure? I can just recall this, and I can take a look, and yep, it's back to 90. So a couple things here to help with the audit. Number one, you can regularly check your system values. You can check all of your system values, or you can check selected system values, whatever your choice. You can choose to not look at all of those system values if you don't want to. You have a record if you use Fix-It. So again, a lot of times auditors want to know how this is all accomplished. So option 20 is a message log. The message log allows you to keep track of what is going on within the PolicyMinder product. So we have a value here, or a message here that says it's being changed. If we drill down into that message, you can see that it's the command string that was used to make the change, as well as the previous value, as well as the person that actually made the change. So again, there's a complete audit trail of what's gone on to put this system back into compliance with your policy. The other thing that's really handy and really comes into play in a lot of times with the system values is this option 18 to add a policy description. So when you look at security best practices, several of the system values would have them be turned on, but in practicality it either breaks things or it's just not very good use with today's technology. So two of those are the limit sec offer and limit device session system values. And I've added a justification as to why they can't be set to security best practices. And then I've also added the justification in part of the security policy where, or the section of the security policy that I'm implementing with these policy values. So that is all one nice, neat package. And where this shows up is when I print my policy. So what I can do is print my system value category. If I wanted to, I could just do the password section, but I'll do the whole thing. And what I can do is email that to myself. And then I can hand it to my auditor and show them that that is our policy for system values. So that's generated a PDF and has now emailed me that report. And we'll look at that report in just a minute as well. So very easy check to make sure that the security relevant system values are what they are supposed to be set to per your policy. And if you need guidance for what those system values are supposed to be set to, then you look back at the risk assessor and it will tell you what the recommended settings are. So what are the other places that we can use PolicyMinder for audit preparedness? Let's look at the user profile category. Now when we look at the user profile category, I'm showing these things and they are called templates. Now a template is simply a way to tell PolicyMinder what you want to examine. In this case, we're examining user profiles. And I've got a number of them already created here, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. Now, from an audit perspective, there may be a number of different things that auditors are wanting you to look at. They may have criteria that says all of your end users should be limited capability yes. They may want to make sure that you are limiting the number of user profiles that have all objects. They may want to know if there are any user profiles that have default passwords. All of this is available through a PolicyMinder checkup template. So let's take a look at some of those examples. Let's say that your users need to be configured in a specific way. So we'll say end user configuration. And I may be wanting to look at users based on the members of a particular group, or I may want to look at users based on their user class. You know, auditors tend to look at things different ways. It kind of depends on how well versed they are in IBM terminology. They may even call it an AS400. So whatever they call it, they tend to be familiar with one term or another. They may be familiar with the term of user class. So we'll look at it based on the user class. Now, this first screen is where you say which user profiles you want to look at. So you can do that based on a number of different criteria. So I've put my cursor on this type field, and when I press F4, you can see that there are a number of different criteria that can be used to be able to look at the user profiles or include them in the template. So you can see that one of the ways that we can include this is user class, as well as the user profile name, the accounting code, days inactive, members of a group, so on and so forth. So we'll look at the user class here. And in this case, we're going to look at QUser. QUser, that's not the right one, user. So we want to look at all the users in the user class. Now, maybe I don't want to look at the IBM ones, and I know that I don't have any profiles on this system that begin with the letter Q. So this is an example of being able to omit profiles. So I'm going to omit anything that begins with the letter Q. And in this case, I'm going to for sure say that I want to look and have all the users in the user class have no special authorities. And I want to say limited capability, yes. And so you can see here's all the different attributes that you can look at, and you can see there's a lot of them. You can also see that I'm picking and choosing which ones I want to look at. So I'm just looking at the limited capabilities. I'm looking at the password, and I'll say no default password. And I want to make sure that the password expiration interval is sysval. The rest of them that I leave at the default of any those attributes will be ignored on the compliance check. So I'm only checking the user's password expiration interval. I'm checking the limited capability setting as well as the password for no default of the password. So when I go ahead and create this template, so now I have one called user, I'll exit out of here, and now I'm going to run a compliance check. Now, again, I could run this interactively like I did with the system value, but what I want to do is run the check command so that I can show you this is what you would normally schedule in your job scheduler once you get all these templates configured. And we have guidance for what templates we recommend that you set up. The PolicyMinder manual has step-by-step screenshots to show examples of these types of templates, and we have other guidance for initial templates to get set up. So it's not like you have to start from scratch. We definitely give you guidance on this. So category is user profile, and the template was user. So I can either do a PDF for this, or if for some reason I wanted to send it out to a file, I could send the results out to an out file, or I can send it to a spreadsheet. So some auditors like spreadsheets. Some actually load them because they think that they could be modified. So whatever your auditor requires, we've got that format. And again, you can, by default, we will generate a report that shows that are out of compliance. What we're trying to do is save you time. So when you set this up and run this regularly, you could set it up so that it would only email you if there's action to take or there's a non-compliant item. So we're generating the report. Okay, so let's go and look at the results. And if we look at the user profile here, and I'll take a work with, you can see, got quite a few things that are out of compliance. So let's take a look at this. The policy will always be on the left. That's how you defined it. That's what you want the settings to be. The value, or what it actually is always on the right. And you can see in this case, the limited capability setting is not correct. And that looks like that's why that one's out of compliance. And that's the type of thing that you'll see on all of these, is that if it's not correct, it will be highlighted. So in this case, it's supposed to be no special authorities, and we've got all object and sec admin in this case. So that's not too cool. So again, you can use this to either prove to your auditor that you are doing these regular checks and that it's the way that it's supposed to be. You can also use Policy Manager to prepare for that audit, knowing that they are going to ask certain questions, and you can use it if you haven't been using it regularly so far. When you first start to use Policy Manager, most people use it as a way to discover what the current settings are and know what they have to clean up ahead of that audit. So in this case, I know that I have several user profiles that I need to go through and take a look at their special authorities, take a look at their limited capability settings to make sure that all of those end users really are configured the way that they're supposed to be configured. Okay, let's go back and look at the user profile settings again, because there's some other things I'd like to show you. Another thing that you might be audited on, or that auditors will look for, are profiles, or the process that you are using to manage your inactive profiles. So some people do this by hand, some people don't do this at all. I like to show people the Policy Manager reports on this because it is so easy to automate this process. So if I take a 2, I'll show you what I've already set up. So I have defined a template to include or look at all of the profiles that are inactive 90 days. This could be any number, 89, 87, 2, if you want to be really cruel. Whatever your number is. I have omitted some things because, again, we're trying to save you time. You don't want to have a report come out for profiles that you know are going to look inactive but aren't, things that own objects, IBM profiles, and so forth. Okay, so what I'm going to look for in this case is to make sure that the status is disabled. So if a profile is inactive 90 days or more, it will be in compliance if it is already set to disabled, but it will be out of compliance if it remains enabled. So if we run a compliance check on that, the result is going to look like this, where some things are in compliance and some are out. If I look at this, I can see that it is, the status is set to disabled, so that's why it's compliant. But if I look at the next profile down, it's out of compliance because it is still status of enabled. So a couple things that you can do with this. You may want to just generate the compliance check and generate the report that shows the profiles out of compliance. You may want to review that before you take action on it, or you may want to automate the process and follow your compliance check with the fix-it command. The fix-it command will, in this case, change any profile that is not omitted and that is 90 days inactive. It will set that automatically to be a status of disabled. So you know that that is being handled automatically. Another way that this is used is to identify the profiles that need to be removed from the system. And those can either be removed, again, by hand. You can delete those by hand, or we can help you automate that process by using the delete template. The delete template for any profile that is listed in this template, it will run the delete user profile command when fix-it is run. Again, all of this is automated, and so it would all be recorded in that message log. Again, from an audit perspective, you can go back and prove to the auditor that you have the automated process in place and that the reporting is in place. Finally, I'll show you one last thing for the user profiles, and then we'll move on to other parts of the product. So if we take a look at the user profile category again, and we take a look at this first template that I've created. One of the other things that I see most auditors requiring is limiting the number of powerful profiles on the system, so super users or users with all object. In this case, my definition of a super user is anyone that has all object assigned to the profile or is a member of the CUSEC offer group. So what I want to do is not just look at the current list, but I want to know if any additional profiles have all object added or become a member of CUSEC offer. So I'm doing that with this parameter called new profile allowed. The default is yes, and I've changed it to no. When I first run a compliance check using this template, the template will list all of the current profiles that currently have all object or are a member of CUSEC offer. But if I go ahead and create a new user profile that has all object, and then run a compliance check, it is going to identify that new profile as being out of compliance because it's new. So let's see what that looks like. Oh, let's run this interactively. Oops, can't type today. So we will run this compliance check, and we will see that there are some that are in compliance and out of compliance. Now this I'll show you a trick here. F24 more keys rotates the function keys, and you can see there's F17 to subset. So I just want to look at the non-compliant items here. So here is the profile that we created today. When we display the compliance status, you can see it's out of compliance because it is new. Now, if this is a legitimate profile that is supposed to have all object, maybe it's a new application, maybe it's a new team member, I can just say accept new, and it will be added to that baseline. If it's a profile that shouldn't have all object, then I can take the appropriate action and remove that, either the whole profile or the all object, whatever the appropriate action is. But the point here is that there is a very easy way to find out what this compliance status looks like. And in fact, if I wanted to run a report of this, I could quite easily do that with the print compliance report. And I'll show you what that exception-based reporting looks like. Okay, so let's go and look at the GUI interface, because this is the easiest way to look at the reports. All of our PDFs, if they're not emailed to you, will appear in the integrated file system under the /SkyView/PolicyMinder directory. So the easiest way to look at the reports is to use the GUI, or else to go through iSeries Navigator. I have signed on to our GUI. This is a web-based interface, and the web-based interface allows me to see multiple systems. So it's very easy to know whether I have issues on any of my systems or not very quickly. And if I look at my user profile category, you can see it lists the same templates that I listed in the green screen. So you can either use the green screen or the GUI, either one. When I go to look at the reports, I can do that under multi-system tasks or single system tasks. And if I open this up, you can see that we've got our listing of reports. Okay, so let's see. The one that we just did right now, I think, is right here. And this is that all object report. So when I open up the bookmarks, it will tell me the category and the template that was examined. And I have two profiles that were new. So when I look at the details, I'll close this up real quick. You can see the policy, again, is on the left, and the value discovered is on the right. You can see it's out of compliance because it's new. So when, again, it's exception-based reporting, so there is no comparison of lists from the last time you ran to this time you run. If there are new items, they are very clearly identified for you. So you can very quickly identify what is out of compliance. If everything is in compliance, again, we're trying to save you time. It will be a one-page report. It will say compliant, and you know that you don't have to look further. So not only does it save you time, but it is also proving to your auditor that you are checking this on a regular basis. Now, one of the reports that I was showing you was the policy report, and so we had some justification in that system value report, if you remember, for some of the system values not being set to security best practices. So if I click on that report name, you can see that this is where that justification comes out. You get about a half a page of printed items that you can add, and it will show up in about half of a page worth of information. And then the policy starts for all of the system values thereafter. So those are the reports for that. So let me show you a couple other things. Here is the library category, and this is where I have definitely seen auditors require that certain authorities be set on certain files. So one, is that the case? I've seen that with applications like J.D. Edwards or Infinium, or perhaps the payment card regulations where the file storing the credit cards has to be set to public exclude. So whether your auditor goes and looks at an entire application, maybe not, but I have definitely seen them look at specific file settings. So how would that work? So I'm going to create a new library template, and this is the same principle as user profile templates, where you define to PolicyMinder what you want to look at. So we're going to look at, let's call this demo, something clever. Demo on Wednesday. And again, we have a notes section, so I can say what I am doing. So I am implementing security policy section 12.5, requiring files with HR data to be denied by default or public exclude. Okay. So when I go to the Libraries tab, this is where I say which libraries I'm going to look at. So I can actually name the libraries, or I could put in a generic. So I'm going to use a generic. This will pull in all of the libraries that begin with the letters JD when the compliance check is run. Again, I can include and omit if I wanted to, or had something to omit. And now I can specify what I want to examine when the compliance check runs. So this is at the library level. I've seen auditors require that specific libraries be set to public exclude, for example. So that might be one of the criteria you look at. And maybe that's all that you look at the library level. But then you want to look in the library and look at some of the objects in the library. So I'm going to create an object template. This allows me to look at the specific files. It might be all of my files. Maybe it's all of my physical files. And then I can state what again, properties should be examined. So maybe I am looking at a specific owner. Maybe there's supposed to be an authorization list or not, and so forth. Maybe public authority is supposed to be, in this case, use. Needed to add that. Okay, so that's one example, and I'm looking at all of my files. Maybe I have a specific file that I need to look at. So let's look at a specific file. And maybe this is my master file. So it's a type file. And again, this is any object type. So it could be program, it could be OutQ. In this case, we're looking at files. And again, we can specify the things that we want to check and just leave the default for things we don't want to check. In this case, I'm going to say it does need to be secured with an authorization list. I think this is the name of it, HR Auth List. I'm going to say that the object auditing is supposed to be all, and I want the public authority to come from the authorization list and no private authorities. Or perhaps you have a file and you have a set of users that have been approved to have special authorities. You could specify what those are. Okay, so we've included that. So now when I run a compliance check on this template, it's going to go off and submit that to batch, and it will look for any of the libraries that begin with the letters JD, and then it will look for the physical files and evaluate those, and then it will look for PRPMS and evaluate that one. Okay, so that's been submitted to batch. So let's take a look at what this looks like. I had set up a template earlier. You get a compliance tab now. Once you run the compliance check, you'll get the compliance tab. So if I look at the libraries themselves, you can see the details. It's out of compliance. In this case, the policy said that it was supposed to be owned by JDE, and it was owned by CJW, so it's out of compliance. And I think I had said that there's supposed to be a private authority to accommodate a change management package, and that's missing. So then if I want to look at the objects in the libraries, I can look at the details, and again, you can see where it is in and out of compliance. So again, you can check the settings on a regular basis. You can use the check command and have the report emailed to you. You can also use Fixit. If we go back into the General tab and say Enable Fixit, I could run Fixit on this, and it would make the changes for me. So the ownership would be correct, the public authority would be correct, and so forth. One of the things about Fixit is that you can run Fixit in test mode. That is a comfort to a lot of people. They may want to experiment with Fixit, but not necessarily be real comfortable with it. And so it's very easy to run this in test mode. So I'll go ahead and do that. Run Fixit in test mode. And I can submit that. And that's gone off to batch. So then when we go and look at the message log, it will be a slightly different message. So I take a look at that. You can see that the messages now are preceded with right pointing arrows. And it gives you the command string of what would be changed, but it doesn't actually make the change. So again, from an audit perspective, a lot of auditors demand good change management practices. So a lot of times people will need to submit what's going to be changed on a particular day. So what a lot of people will do is take the report that is generated when Fixit is run in test mode, submit that as their change management ticket to say these are the objects that are going to be changed. So a lot of ways that you can support your current processes, support the audit process just by using PolicyMinder. One other thing that I want to show you about PolicyMinder, and then I'll show you some quick things that we can do with Audit Journal Reporter. One of the things that we can do is import policies with PolicyMinder. So it's not like you have to set all these policies up on each individual server. What you can do is use one system as the template, if you will, or the master system, and you can pull all of these templates over to other systems. So a lot of times you have to check the same type of things, like look for powerful users on all of your systems, or look at specific system values on all of your systems. So you can import those policies and have a consistent set of policies around your network. Now the last thing I'll show you has to do with our Audit Journal Reporter product. One of the things that auditors will often want you to do is to have a set of reports that you look at on a regular basis. And when I say a set of reports, I mean a set of reports of activity that has been logged to the Audit Journal. If you're not familiar with the Audit Journal, one of the things, or the purpose of the Audit Journal is to log all security events. So things like authority failures, creation of user profiles, the granting of authority, invalid sign-on attempts, changes to auditing values, anything that's security related goes in that Audit Journal. Now, if I was to say that you had to look at every entry in that Audit Journal, I would be imposing cruel and unusual punishment to you. There's just a huge amount of information in there. But what you can do is use Audit Journal Reporter to look at least a subset of that information. And what you're really looking for are security events that are exceptions to what the normal occurrence should be. So what you're not looking for is normal activity. What you're looking for is abnormal activity. So we do that and by providing reports that are predefined for you. So I'm going to go into option 2, and we have these grouping of reports called destinations, and the default destination is this destination called AJR, and that's the default destination. But what I want to point out to you is that we ship a destination called AJR Basic. So if you do nothing else or don't know where to start, the AJR Basic destination are a set of reports that auditors would want you to look at on a regular basis. So I'll scroll down a little bit here. So things like interactive jobs, the sign off and sign on of interactive jobs. And in this case, we've defaulted this to only look at the interactive job usage for things like QSecOffer, QProgrammer, QUser, the IBM profiles that can be used for sign-on. Another thing that we look at are invalid sign-on attempts. And again, we've defaulted this to look at the QSecOffer, QProgrammer, but you can change that to look at all of them if you want to. But my point in showing you this is that you can at least know where to start and get a basic set of reports so that you're looking for that exception activity that the auditors are wanting you to look at. They're basically trying to make sure that you know what's going on in your system. So when you look at these reports, the way that you can know what they are actually going to include, other than just this brief description here that you see, we can take option 13 to show the guidelines. And this gives you a better description of what the report is going to include, and it will also tell you if any of the reports have been defaulted to only include specific users. And in this case, again, it's those IBM profiles that can be used for sign-on. One of the reports that I want to point out are the system value reports. So you can see that, again, is part of the basic recommendation. So what we did in this case is to default these to only include or look at the security relevant system values because, again, from an auditor perspective, those are the ones that they probably care about. They don't care about the performance reports, different things like that. So they're wanting to know that you are aware of system value changes. So what you can do is use Audit Journal Reporter in conjunction with PolicyMinder. If PolicyMinder is seeing that a system value has changed, one of the things you can do is look back at this report to see who actually made the change. So we changed a couple system values this morning, so let's generate this report. Now I'm just going to extract the information from the Audit Journal receiver, and now I'm going to generate the report real quick. Workable file. Okay, so when we look at this report, this is the system value report. It's a 3-line entry. So here's today's date, the system it was changed on, the person that changed it, the system value that was changed, and the job, the new value, and then the old value. So the new value is no max, and the old value is 90. So you can see that there were 2 changes there, and you can see exactly who made them. So again, the products work quite nicely together to document where the changes were and who made the change. I think that answers the question that came in. That's kind of a whirlwind to show and just a little bit of a taste of how you use the SkyView products to prepare for an audit. If you have specific questions, please type them in and we'll get those answered, or please feel free to send us a question at support@skyviewpartners.com and we'll get the questions answered that way as well.
Thank you very much, Carol. If you do have a question, you can type it into the dialog box now. Let me reiterate, we saw the SkyView Risk Assessor for a comparison to best practice policy minder, letting you set the baseline to run a compliance check and use Fix-It. Audit Journal Reporter to get events, security-related events from your audit journal. Let me add to that SkyView also offers services to do this. You can use the SkyView Security Checkup and send your Risk Assessor reports to SkyView for review, and we'll review those with you and have an online meeting and a deliverable of recommendations. We also have Policy Minder's managed services, so you can have SkyView monitor your security configuration for non-compliant events. And of course, SkyView continues to do re-architecture and all sorts of security remediation services as well. As Carol mentioned, if you do have other questions or requests for information, feel free to contact your authorized SkyView reseller or contact us directly at www.skyviewpartners.com. So with that, I think we are
JD,
done
there was one more question.